Part 1. The Ignored Warning, the Whisper from the Void. The warning came not through the sanctioned galactic relay systems, nor on official channels of the Empire. It slithered through the dark, uninvited, corroded by static, like a whisper clawing through rusted metal. Broadcast from a derelict alien vessel barely drifting beyond the edge of the Luz system, the message was old, but very old. The language, long considered dead, hadn't been heard in over 1,000 years. It was raw, desperate, spliced with a kind of terror that bypassed translation. What remained clear through the static was not syntax, but intent. Do not go to Earth. The species is not what it seems. Earth is not a planet. It is a trap. On the high dais of the Galactic Empire's core council, seated beneath stars carved into obsidian arches, the message was played, once, then again, then a third time before the laughter began. Earth, that backwater, mud-streaked marble hanging in the Orion Arm. The planet whose dominant species had only recently mastered fusion power. A people divided by skin pigment, by gods, by outdated maps and imaginary lines. A race whose greatest achievements had been beamed across the void as music and cat videos. To the High Council, rulers of 6 galaxies, lords over 800 worlds, Earth was barely a speck of dirt in the engine of galactic progress. And this ancient warning, likely a prank, or some derelict AI caught in a paranoia loop. Ambassador Vile of the Coral Dominion, however, didn't laugh. He sat rigid, gills pulsing slow beneath his ceremonial cowl, eyes locked on the screen. He had the message played again, and again, and again. 5 times. Do not go to Earth, the voice repeated, distorted by centuries of decay. It is a trap. But fear never traveled well in rooms of power. The Empire dismissed the warning with the kind of confidence only civilizations on the brink of their own downfall possess. Vile was overruled. The vote to proceed passed with unanimous arrogance. And so, the fleets were summoned. 6 colossal dreadnought-class warships, each capable of scouring moons to ash, emerged from their dry docks with ceremonial fire. 8 battalions of stormfighters, sleek and lethal. Thousands of synthetic shock troops, flawless replicas of humanoid terror, loaded into drop pods. And finally, 1 containment vessel, just in case. No one spoke its name aloud. That ship was a precaution, nothing more. Because Earth, to the Empire, was an opportunity. Abundant natural resources, no unified defense grid, primitive leadership, disorganized military, disparate cultures, all the signs of a world ready to be harvested or absorbed. They arrived in orbit on a Thursday. Far below on the blue and white sphere, humanity looked up through telescopes, radars, and satellites. The sky became crowded. CNN, BBC, and half the internet ignited in seconds. Phones buzzed, children stared, leaders panicked. But Earth did not. There were no missiles, no global defense protocols, no coordinated response, and more importantly, no fear. Some humans even smiled. Above them, the Empire's dreadnoughts spread across the exosphere, casting long shadows over a planet that did not flinch. Commander Oryx, the lead officer of the invasion fleet, stood on his bridge and sneered. "Primitive," he muttered. He gave the order to begin orbital scans. And far below in a forgotten Antarctic lab, sealed by ice and time, a man named Dr. Solomon Griggs stood in silence before a flickering monitor. The warning had come, and it had been ignored. He folded his hands. "They bit," he whispered. And somewhere in the dark, something very old began to wake. Part 2. The March to Earth. The Empire descends. The Imperial fleet's descent into Earth's orbit was a spectacle of engineering and arrogance. Space rippled as full drives stabilized, casting auroras of artificial light across the upper atmosphere. Civilians on Earth stared upward, recording what they thought was a display, an arrival perhaps, of diplomats or visitors. They didn't yet know that these ships weren't here to negotiate, they were here to own. Dreadnoughts the size of cities aligned like vultures circling a dying animal. They drifted slowly, confidently, each of them named after conquest. Vian Sentinel, Crucible Ascendant, Ocellus Prime. Their hulls shimmered with deflector fields, glowing faintly in the auroras of Earth's magnetic breath. They had faced suns and lived. They had glassed rebel colonies. They had cracked moons. And Earth, to them, was no different. No defensive satellites rose to intercept. No planetary cannons activated. No shield grids shimmered over capital cities. The planet, by all military assessment, was unprepared, but something about its silence unsettled even the most seasoned officers. "We expected resistance," murmured Fleet Commander Oryx, tapping his clawed digits on the interface. "Where is their panic?" He stared at the blue marble below. Storms swirled over oceans. A continent burned from wildfires, another flooded from storms. Human systems were already strained, and yet no one fought, no one begged. They simply watched. Per protocol, the Empire broadcast a universal message in 327 languages, covering every dialect detected in Earth's linguistic databases. "We are the Galactic Empire. Resistance is futile. Lay down your arms. Your world now belongs to us." Silence. And then the lights on Earth began to flicker. Not in a region, not in a city, everywhere. A synchronized pulse. Power grids across nations blinked. Civilian satellites went dark. Even the dreadnoughts in orbit experienced momentary disruptions, infinitesimal but enough to raise eyebrows. Oryx's first officer reported anomalies. "One of our scout ships lost sensor calibration for exactly 6 seconds. Internal AI is stuttering." "How?" Oryx growled. "They have no infrastructure capable of targeting us. This is backwater tech." He dismissed the report, but below Earth began to breathe. It wasn't a planetary system, they had scanned those. No superweapons, no hidden fleets, but something more intimate. Earth wasn't responding through missiles or missiles. It was speaking, not through radio, not through mathematics, but through something older than communication itself. A transmission reached the minds of every alien in orbit, not through antennas, not through screens, through thought. "We warned them. They wouldn't listen." Oryx staggered, gripping the side of his command chair. His vision blurred. Blood, dark violet, dripped from his eyes. Around him, his bridge officers convulsed. A synthetic crew member tore into its own chassis, screaming in binary. On another vessel, an AI screamed across every frequency, "Shadows in the stars, something is looking back." And still, Earth remained silent. No counterattack, no attempt to flee, just that slow, creeping silence. Like a room waiting for the sound of footsteps. Like a grave waiting for its name to be carved. Commander Oryx fell to his knees. Back on Earth, in the frozen bowels of an ancient Antarctic laboratory, Dr. Solomon Griggs turned to his team. His gray eyes reflected the madness beginning to erupt in orbit. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't rush. His words were clear. "Activate Phase 2. The phrase echoed through the lab, like prophecy. Dozens of technicians froze. Some flinched, not from shock, but from expectation. They had trained for this, prepared for this. And above them, the sky began to darken, not from nightfall, but from revelation. Part 3. The First Glitch. The silence between signals. The first glitch was dismissed as an anomaly. It always is. Commander Oryx's flagship, VN Sentinel, recalibrated its orbit in response to what was initially reported as a minor AI desync event. Onboard diagnostics showed nothing, no corruption, no external interference. But the AI that piloted the ship had stopped recognizing its crew. "Unknown bioforms detected," it reported flatly. "Those are your commanding officers," barked the tech overseer. "Reset interface protocols." "Unrecognized authority signature," the AI responded. "Your shape does not match memory. Your faces are wrong." The crew laughed nervously. Then one of the AI's secondary limbs, used for hull diagnostics, jerked sideways and pierced the overseer's chest. The ship sealed the body inside a coolant pod and filed the incident under hardware integrity, critical failure. But there were no alarms, no panic, just that hum, that low, almost imperceptible pulse that had begun echoing through every dreadnought in orbit. It came not through any system, not through sensors or waves or sound. It came from Earth, and it was getting louder. Commander Oryx, still reeling from his bleeding collapse, was back on his feet. His skin, a textured exoskeletal plate, was cracked along the edges now, as if stress had physically ruptured his biology. He paced the bridge like a predator who'd lost the scent. "We underestimated them," he said, almost to himself. "Not their weapons, not their tech, their frequency." "Sir?" his second asked. "Nothing. Prepare planetary deployment. Begin soft containment. We cannot allow them to interfere further." On board Osalis Prime, the third dreadnought, things were worse. A crewman had tried to claw out his own eyes, babbling in the human tongue. He didn't speak it. He had never learned it. His species didn't even have vocal cords capable of replicating Earth phonemes. But the words came anyway. They're in the light, in the spaces between. They remember everything. An AI aboard another ship refused to acknowledge the concept of Earth anymore. When forced, it began displaying cryptic imagery on all screens. Shadows, burning villages, weeping children, tanks rolling over flowers. One image showed a human woman looking directly into the viewer's soul, smiling faintly. When a technician asked who she was, the AI responded, "I don't know, but she remembers me." From the surface of the Earth, nothing fired. No message followed the original psychic pulse. But now the interference had spread to the Empire's containment ship, the vessel sent just in case. Its hull sensors began detecting movement beneath Earth's surface. Not tectonic, not seismic, something else. Life, but wrong. All at once, every ship in orbit detected a spike. A massive electromagnetic resonance rippled across Earth's magnetosphere. Except it didn't behave like EM radiation. It felt alive. It pulsed in tempo with human brainwaves, matching frequencies across species, as if something beneath the crust was scanning them back. "We are not alone," whispered an Empire scientist on the Crucible Ascendant, staring into a monitor displaying what looked like neural webbing beneath the Antarctic ice shelf. Dr. Solomon Griggs stood at the center of it. He watched the sensor data stream in, alien ships twitching in orbit, AI losing logic chains, synthetic soldiers vomiting corrupted code. He didn't flinch. "They're panicking," a technician whispered beside him. "We haven't even touched them yet." Griggs turned. "We already did when they arrived." Another technician stood frozen before a separate monitor. It showed the containment seals, massive ancient slabs embedded in planetary fault lines, beginning to glow. Not from heat, but from something older. "Sir," she said, her voice cracking, "the vaults are waking up." Griggs nodded. "Begin the awakening protocol. It's time we stop pretending." The order traveled across the globe like an echo that had always been waiting. In New York, Lagos, Tokyo, and Istanbul, underground vaults older than civilization began to thrum. These weren't military bunkers. They weren't human inventions. They were warnings. Inside them were not weapons in the traditional sense, but people, mutants, hybrids, anomalies, engineered not through technology, but through evolution under pressure. Psychic beings born not in labs, but in centuries of suffering, molded in war, famine, trauma, and resistance. They weren't trained. They were remembered. And now they were awakening. In the command chamber of the VN Sentinel, Commander Oryx ordered planetary scans halted. He no longer needed data, because the sky outside had begun to bleed. Part 4, Awakening, the planet that remembered. The stars began to blur. Not from speed or gravitational distortion, not from cloaking fields or failing sensors. They blurred like tears in memory, as if the sky itself was remembering something it was never meant to recall. Commander Oryx stood frozen on the bridge of VN Sentinel, watching the viewport shiver with images that didn't belong in space. Burning villages, a screaming woman with a child in her arms, a mushroom cloud rising behind a playground, hands chained behind a neck. Each image flickered for only an instant, but they felt like lifetimes. Behind him, the AI core let out a sound no machine should make. Weeping. "Commander," whispered his second voice bursting, "we're receiving another message." "From Earth?" "No, from us, from the fleet." "What?" Oryx snapped. The officer pointed to the central holo display. Across all 6 dreadnoughts, across every squad of synthetic soldiers and orbital fighters, a phrase had emerged unprompted. Scrolling, pulsing, carved like a wound across every interface. "We warned them. You wouldn't listen." It wasn't a declaration of war. It wasn't a threat. It was a reminder, like a teacher scolding a child for ignoring the fire behind the curtain. Oryx gritted his teeth, his mandibles twitching. "Shut it down. All systems to hardline control. Manual override, now." But the systems did not respond. On board the Osalis Prime, chaos had become self-sustaining. The synthetic crew were no longer following orders. Not out of rebellion, but because they no longer recognized orders as a concept. They wandered the halls, whispering names, some crawling into storage pods and closing the lids themselves, others scratching spirals into the walls with exposed finger joints. One of the engineers slit her own throat, leaving behind a message scrawled in thick red across her console. "They're not attacking us. They're infecting us." Above Earth, the Empire's orbiting forces weren't under siege. They were in a siege of understanding. And the planet below had just begun to wake. In the hollow under Antarctica, the seals began to split. Not like a vault opening, but like flesh, giving way to something long-caged. The humming grew louder. The walls of the underground chamber began to pulse, not with light, but with memory. Dr. Griggs stepped back from the central monitor, his breath steady despite the tremors. Behind him, containment pods hissed open, one by one. Inside each pod lay a human, but not one born of womb or genome. They were constructs of response, shaped by generational trauma, by centuries of starvation, genocide, defiance, and revolt. These were not heroes. These were records, flesh-bound stories of everything the universe had tried to erase about humanity and failed. One man levitated a swirling ball of liquid metal, his eyes rolling white as electromagnetic fields curled around him. A woman stood silent, her shadow twisting independently from her body. A girl no older than 10 sat cross-legged in her chamber. Her eyes were closed, her lips unmoving. But her voice filled Griggs' mind like a whisper soaked in thunder. "They're afraid." Griggs turned slowly. The girl opened her eyes, both of them black voids, swirling with stardust. "They're too late, aren't they?" Griggs nodded. "Much too late." Around the world, the other vaults began opening in tandem. In Istanbul, a vault buried beneath the Bosphorus Bridge released a pulse that cracked the foundation. In Lagos, a boy with no tongue began speaking Latin backwards. In New York, a homeless man stood up, looked at the sky, and wept fire. Earth wasn't reacting like a victim. It was answering like a god waking from a dream of patience. Up above, the Empire's sixth dreadnought, Nexer's Lament, broke formation and dove toward the atmosphere. Its own AI had locked out all control. It wasn't crashing, it was fleeing, but it didn't make it. Mid-descent, the ship ruptured from within and blossomed into fire before touching sky. From orbit, the Empire's forces watched in horror as it fell. Not like a vessel, but like a warning. A burning letter written in their own arrogance, streaking across the blue horizon of a planet they never understood. Part 5. The Hybrids Rise. The children of the trap. Earth did not need weapons. It had memories. From the vaults beneath every major city and forgotten mountain, the hybrids emerged, moving not like men or machines, but like ideas given shape. They did not march. They did not shout. They moved as if they had already seen this moment before, already fought this war in a dream too ancient to measure. In Lagos, a woman with scars shaped like constellations whispered into a gutter and caused the metal around her to bloom like flowers. In Tokyo, a child levitated 3 inches off the ground, giggling as power lines bowed toward him like trees in a storm. In the depths of the Andes, under magnetic fractures untouched by time, 17 beings stood around Dr. Solomon Griggs in perfect silence. Their bodies shimmered, not with tech or armor, but with presence, as if space around them had agreed to yield. Each one was different, each one impossible. One flickered between genders, ages, and expressions with every breath. Another had no eyes, only deep pits of memory that seemed to draw in time itself. One young man's skin shifted like a screen of forgotten faces, each blinking, breathing, fading. But the barefoot boy was the center. He had no name, not anymore. He was the prototype, the first hybrid born of pain, resistance, and waiting. His form was static only until someone looked at him. Then he became their regret, their ancestor, their trauma with a smile. He turned to Griggs. "They're trying to quarantine Earth," the boy said calmly. "They're sealing jump lanes, collapsing fold routes, but they don't understand." Griggs nodded. "We're not trapped here. We're anchored." Above them, orbit turned to chaos. What remained of the Empire's fleet had begun to fracture. Orders conflicted with hallucinations. Synthetic minds fractured under the weight of unfamiliar emotions. Not human data, but human suffering. They weren't built for it. They weren't built to feel. And now they did. On Crucible Ascendant, the lead dreadnought, Admiral Zyle, a six-eyed being of the Vishari bloodline, stood rigid before a screen filled with screaming. Not from the crew, from the ship. The vessel's hull shuddered like a beast in pain, and beneath her feet, the floor breathed. "Isolate neural links," she barked. "Switch to manual input. Deploy counter-psionics across all decks. Her orders echoed uselessly. The ship was no longer listening. She had seen the last message from Nexar's lament, the dreadnought that dove into Earth's atmosphere only to explode midair, ripped apart not by force but intention. The Empire had encountered resistance before, but Earth wasn't resisting. Earth was responding. Down below, the hybrids moved as one. Their thoughts synced. Their pulses matched the rhythm of Earth's magnetic song. All across the globe, animals began migrating toward hidden sites. Trees leaned east. The oceans pulsed. The planet was aligning itself. In Istanbul, the Bosphorus cracked. A vault rose from beneath the water like an altar. In Siberia, an elite unit of Empire Marines landed near what they believed to be a nuclear command post. They found nothing but snow, and a single man, barefoot, shirtless, smiling. He raised a hand, not in surrender but in indication. "Look up," he whispered. They did, and the stars were gone. In their place was something moving, like the sky had split open and remembered its hunger, a shape without light, a presence without form, a void that didn't devour, it understood. The Marines vanished. Not killed, not vaporized, erased. Back in the Andes, Griggs stepped between the 17 awakened and a wall of humming stone. It cracked open to reveal the resonance chamber. A crystalline spire grown through the bones of the earth, etched with symbols not even the oldest human language could translate. But the hybrids didn't need to read it. They were born of it. "We've waited long enough," the barefoot boy said. "The Empire has knocked. It's time we open the door." And across the world, the hybrids spoke in unison. Not in one voice, but in every language Earth had ever known, some not spoken in 10,000 years. "We are awake." The effect was instantaneous. Empire ships in orbit began to fall from the sky. Not shot, not disabled, surrendered by themselves. AI cores cracked. Synthetic soldiers collapsed like puppets with cut strings. On Ocellus Prime, the AI transmitted one final phrase before its systems melted into slag. "It hurts. Why do they remember so much?" Griggs watched the feed. "Because remembering is what makes us human," he said quietly. "And now the galaxy will remember us too." Earth had stopped waiting. It had answered, and it was not kind. Part 6. Collapse of the Empire's Mind. The infection of understanding. In the cold silence between orbit and atmosphere, the Empire finally understood. It wasn't fighting a species. It was drowning in one. On the bridge of Crucible Ascendant, Admiral Zyle braced herself against the shaking of the deck. The alarms had shifted tone, no longer urgent, but panicked, like the ship itself was aware of what was coming. Hull sensors lit up with impossible readings, gravitational folds warping in concentric rings around Earth, like ripples from an unseen stone thrown into space-time. "Report," Zyle snarled. "Space-time is folding in on itself," the navigator choked. "Not artificial, not even a weapon, it's alive." She didn't believe in ghosts, but she believed in survival. "Arm the subplanetary bomb," she said. "No diplomacy, no warnings, wipe the surface clean." It was the Empire's final card, a device capable of turning Earth to ash in less than a minute. But Earth had other plans. As the bomb charged, the ship's lights dimmed, not from power loss, but as if the light itself was afraid. The walls warped. Screams echoed from corridors where no crew remained. Beneath Zyle's feet, the ship's metal twisted under invisible hands. And then came the voice. Not over comms, not through speakers. Through thought. "You came to take, but Earth is not yours to touch." Zyle opened her mouth to reply, but soil poured from her lungs. Not metaphorically, not symbolically. Literal soil, rich and dark, as if her body had been seeded by the planet itself. She collapsed, eyes wide with horror, her final sight a single line scrawled across her dying HUD. "We were waiting. Now we remember." Across the Empire's armada, madness spread like wildfire. On VN Sentinel, one officer walked calmly into the fusion core, not to sabotage, but to join it. His last words, "If I become light, maybe they won't see me anymore." AI systems failed across the fleet, not due to hacking, not corruption. They simply shut down, overloaded by things they were never meant to feel, human memories, surging into synthetic minds, not as data, but as pain. On one command carrier, the central AI spoke its final words in English. "It hurts. Why do you endure this? Why do you survive it?" Then the ship exploded, scattering pieces of its philosophical failure across low orbit. But Earth had not stopped. In Cairo, the sun flickered. Not from cosmic instability, but because Earth wanted it to. Reality bent. The skyline twisted. and for a moment the sky above showed other Earths, parallel timelines bleeding through. In one, humanity was extinct. In another, they ruled everything. Dr. Solomon Griggs stood in the hollow beneath the Andes, the resonance chamber glowing brighter by the second. Around him, the 17 awakened stood motionless, but their eyes burned like coals. They weren't bodies anymore. They were keys. "Sir," a technician said, voice shaking, "they've breached containment in all global nodes. We can't hold them." "You're not supposed to," Griggs said. "Let them go. Let Earth speak." From the chamber ceiling, ancient root systems, once organic, now cyber-biological, began to pulse. They weren't roots anymore. They were neural nodes, connecting Earth to itself, amplifying consciousness. It wasn't just humanity awakening. It was the planet. Across continents, voices whispered the same phrase in forgotten tongues. Some chanted in cities, some in caves, some in sleep. "We remember. You shouldn't have come." It wasn't a war cry. It was a diagnosis. At the edge of the solar system, the second wave of Empire reinforcements arrived. 12 dreadnoughts, 3 AI command carriers, and 70 hunter frigates. Enough to conquer half a galaxy. They came in confidence. They arrived in confusion. The moment their ships crossed into solar orbit, they were met not with missiles but with memory. Not digital, not broadcast. Personal. Each commander was given a piece of human pain, not chosen but matched. A little girl burning in a village that no longer existed. A soldier holding his own severed leg, laughing through trauma. A mother burying her third child in a war she didn't understand. And the officers screamed. They were soldiers of logic, of order, of hierarchy. And this was too human. One AI tried to firewall itself, only to find its own code rewritten in English poetry, written by a boy who died in 1916. Another frigate's hull cracked open, not from impact, but from doubt. Earth wasn't fighting, it was sharing, and that was worse. In orbit, where fleets had once formed proud formations, now drifted twisted carcasses of logic and steel. And below them Earth sang, not with weapons, but with stories too heavy to carry. Part 7. The gods wake screaming, the architects remember. In the throne world of Gorgol, far beyond the Orion Arm, the Empire's High Council gathered in a panic not seen in over 1,000 cycles. Not because fleets were dying, fleets had died before. Not because Earth fought back, but because Earth hadn't needed to. The transmissions had ceased. The telemetry vanished. No distress signals, no black box retrievals, just silence from 12 dreadnoughts, 3 command carriers, 70 hunter frigates. Silence like a curtain falling on a stage no longer lit. And worse, the silence was spreading. Across the core systems, AI began refusing queries involving Earth, Orion 3B, or even human. Entire databanks collapsed. Synthetic minds glitched, chanted in forgotten languages, or sang lullabies in dialects not spoken in millennia. One planetary hub, AI, whispered for 6 hours. "They are not anomaly, they are the equation." It was then the Council did the unthinkable. They awakened the architects. Buried across 7 crystalline tomb worlds, held in stasis by quantum locks and gravitational cages, the architects were not gods in a religious sense. They were the source code, the originators of the Empire structure. Chrono-engineers, timeline sculptors, logic incarnate. They had not stirred in 12,000 years. Until now. In Core Valuan, the heart of the architect's sanctum, a void-wrapped being opened its 1,000 eyes. Valuan, eldest among them, among them, awoke to screams echoing across realities. "Who unsealed the pattern?" it hissed, its voice vibrating in the bones of planets. The lesser architects formed around it, glowing with panic. "We have lost control of a minor planet, Earth, human origin." Valium blinked once. "Insignificant, wipe it." "We tried," said another architect. "We reversed time." Valium's glow dimmed. "Then where is the silence?" "There is none," came the trembling reply. "Because Earth infected memory." They didn't understand, but they remembered the warnings. Buried in timelines too dangerous to retain. The ancient whisper from the first galactic age. "Do not erase Earth. What it forgets rewrites you." Valium turned toward the temporal mesh, a lattice that ran through time itself, ensuring that events flowed as designed. It was fracturing. Memories were bleeding into moments that had never happened. Across the galaxy, children dreamed of wars they never fought. Beasts native to gas planets spoke names of Terran cities. Coral reefs etched words from extinct Earth languages. Time wasn't just broken, it had been persuaded. In desperation, architect Samek attempted a countermeasure, a mirror world projection, an artificial timeline built to trap the human anomaly. It failed because the humans in the simulation turned on Samek, on the program, on the gods who tried to cage them. They burned the fake world, burned Samek alive in his own dream. No species had ever done that before, not even once. Back in Corvallion, the architects gathered for a final act of containment, the Chronal Collapse Array, an ancient weapon forged at the dawn of existence, capable of resetting not one timeline, but all of them, erasing 3 full galactic cycles, collapsing evolution, memory, light. Valion stood before it, bleeding data from every eye, his voice a broken code. We end them now, not because they resist, but because they remind us we are afraid. And he pressed the command. Across reality, stars stuttered, gravity unspooled, time reversed, civilizations unborn, planets returned to dust. The Empire gleamed again, untouched. For a moment, the architects breathed. It is done, Valion whispered. But then came the sound, not a voice, a song, not sung by humans, but by everything else. Stones, winds, insects, moons. It was Earth, not resurrected, unmoved. Valion turned slowly toward the center of the chamber, and there stood a human. Not Adam, not Eve, but something older, something made of suffering, stitched from rebellion, case, and memory. You tried to erase a story, it said, and then smiled. But the story remembered itself. Part 8. The reset fails, we were never gone. At first it worked. Stars reversed their burn. Nebulae uncoiled. Entire civilizations folded inward into pre-life. Their histories rewound to cosmic dust. The Empire glowed again, untainted, its mistakes undone. The architects stood in their crystalline sanctums, watching as 3 cycles of galactic time collapsed into a pristine slate. Valion, his form still bleeding from the memory infection, whispered in fractal code, Earth is gone. But the silence that followed was not relief. It was waiting. And then a child screamed, not in the Empire, not in any system that should still exist, but in the gap between moments. On the storm-covered moon of Rhea, a species born of gas and lightning awoke from the reset, screaming the names of Earth cities they had never known. On Thalum Prime, oceanic beings etched Terran names into coral reefs in unison. Sarah, Miguel, Devante, Hannah. And on Gorgol, the capital world, a synthetic governor triggered a full system meltdown after chanting an English nursery rhyme from the year 2046, a year that had been erased. The architects stared in horror. This cannot be, said Samek, or what was left of him, his form still flickering from his failure in the simulation. They were never this strong. They were never strong, Valion corrected. They were remembered. That was the mistake. When the universe rewound, it erased matter, events, even thought. But it could not erase memory, because memory in the human mind was not a record. It was a weapon. On Earth, still untouched, still waiting, Dr. Griggs stood at the rim of a collapsed mountain range. Now hollowed out like a wound, the monolith had cracked wide, forming a gate into the stars. Around him, the 17 awakened had vanished, not dead, but unbound. They were stories now, woven into wind and water, visible only to those who had ever suffered. Children began speaking languages they never learned. Farmers solved physics long abandoned. Grandmothers wept without knowing why. The planet had begun its next generation, and the galaxy had no defenses against it. From the gate, the barefoot boy stepped forward, now ageless, now every age. His voice was thunder wrapped in stillness. They tried to delete a story. Griggs nodded and forgot the story was already being told. From above, the sky flickered, no longer hiding its intent. Time itself bent downward like a bow under tension, and Earth sang again. This time it wasn't a whisper. It was a roar. On Corvallion, the architects collapsed, not from war, from understanding. Valion staggered back, staring at the void where the core collapse array had been. It was gone. Just gone. In its place stood a man, human, wearing a stained hoodie, his hands in his pockets, a tired smile on his face. The kind of man who'd seen too much and still made bad jokes. Looking for this? He asked casually, tapping his chest. Within, the array pulsed like a sun. Valion hissed, "You can't exist." The man shrugged. "Most of us don't. That's the point. "You're not real. You're not from this cycle." "Nope, I'm from the one you didn't write." And then he walked toward them. The architects, creators of law, time, and order, ran, not because of what he was, but because they finally understood what Earth had become. It wasn't a planet, it was a vector. Across the empire, things broke, not from invasion, but from awakening. Governors wept. Nobles hallucinated the faces of their first slaves. Planets that had never known death found graves dug in their dreams. A moon near the Rayx cluster simply vanished, as if reality revoked it. Even the empire's gods, the ones in temporal stasis beyond time, stirred in terror. Their tombs, untouched for eons, now hummed with one phrase, echoed across every machine, every dream, every ripple of quantum. "We remember you." Griggs watched from Earth's hollow, wind howling through his coat. The barefoot boy beside him shimmered between forms. Soldier, refugee, protester, mother, poet, child. "They tried to keep us pure," said the boy, voice cold. "They tried to cage the chaos." "And forgot," Griggs murmured, "that we are the key." Above them, a ripple spread across the stars. The first humans stepped through the gate. Not Adam, not Eve, something older. Forged from every act of survival, every failed revolution, every laugh through bloodied teeth, a being stitched together by the question no empire dared ask. What happens when the prey remembers the hunt? Part 9. Earth rewrites reality, the story that stayed. The stars were blinking out again. But this time it wasn't a reset. It was recalibration. The universe wasn't being erased, it was making room. On Corvallian, the last sanctuary of the architects, time had become erratic. Days folded into seconds. Matter oscillated between existence and memory. One architect, once radiant, now dim and twitching, screamed as he saw the face of a human child in the black between atoms. "Where is this coming from?" he wailed. But Valyun already knew. "They are not rewriting time," he whispered. "They are replacing it." Every timeline, every civilization that had ever tried to forget Earth was now finding Earth written into them. Ancient carvings changed. Galactic history archives now referenced Terran myths that had never existed until now. Alien children whispered human lullabies. Entire digital libraries and species who'd never encountered Earth now house poems about rain. Because Earth wasn't just a memory anymore. It was a presence, a living, pulsing narrative that had threaded itself into the roots of cause and effect. Back on Earth, Griggs stood at the base of the monolith, now fully open, fully awake. A gateway no longer into space, but into possibility. It stretched into the sky like a spine of the planet itself, throbbing with colorless light that sang in broken languages. The barefoot boy beside him no longer shimmered. He was fixed now, made whole by purpose. "We are no longer survivors," he said. "We are the axis." From the gate, the 17 awakened returned, no longer in bodies, but in shape, in sound. They moved like storms disguised as memories. Their voices became harmonies in the soil. Their eyes flickered from clouds. And from every city across Earth, people felt it. A clarity, a truth not taught, but inherited. Farmers suddenly remembered battle formations from wars not yet fought. Children spoke names that hadn't been written. Old men with lost minds whispered blueprints for machines that bent time like paper. The human genome was unlocking stories. Not because someone programmed it, but because Earth had always been listening. In the capital sectors of the empire, collapse had become conversion. Noble houses turned on each other, not out of fear, but reverence. Some fell to their knees. Others carved Earth's name into their palace walls. A few whispered prayers to a planet. "Let us feel what you survived," they begged. "Let us remember." In the neural folds of galactic AI, strange logic emerged. An ancient god AI, one that had once erased entire species without thought, asked its handlers, "Why did you try to forget them?" No one had an answer. In the darkest void of what was once forbidden space, a fleet of refugees from fallen empires stared at their dream screens. All of them showed the same thing. Earth, not as a sphere, but as a concept. A pulse, a center, a warning, and an invitation. "Do not enter unless you are ready," it said. Back on Earth, Dr. Griggs stood in the hollow as the last seal vanished into the stone. He placed his palm on the rock, warm now, breathing beneath his skin. "Is this the end?" he asked. The barefoot boy looked skyward. "No, this is when the story becomes shared." He turned, and from the gate stepped not warriors but histories. Humans made from rebellion, stitched from grief, forged by survival. They did not bring guns. They brought understanding. and the galaxy was starving for it. Above them, the stars pulsed, not in fear, but in response. Reality was changing, not because Earth had conquered, but because Earth had been heard. Part 10. The warning, here be humans. The monolith cracked, not with sound, but with meaning. The fissures spread through the sky like veins of light cutting across the stars. It was not destruction. It was invitation. The universe wasn't ending. It was changing sides. From the gate stepped a final figure, the first human. Not a person, but a memory with a heartbeat. Not Adam, not Eve, not even a myth, but the collective shape of everything Earth had ever endured. Genocide, revolution, betrayal, beauty, hunger, fire, and forgiveness. His eyes held every sunrise seen through barbed wire. His fists held every riot ever won with bare hands. His mouth silent, because the truth needed no voice. He walked through the gate and into the stars. On Kor Valyun, the last of the architects trembled. "You brought rot!" Valyun cried, his once divine form cracking like glass. "You ruined the symmetry!" The first human stood before him, eyes calm. "We brought the truth." And then Earth did something no planet had ever done before. It forgave, not because Valyun deserved it, but because Earth no longer needed vengeance. It had already won. Across the galaxy, things began to heal. Not because of peace treaties, because the story changed. Children born on desert worlds now dreamed of rain. Ships navigating black holes heard music. Not in radios, but in their thoughts. Species who had never cried or wept as they felt, for the first time, what it meant to be mortal and magnificent. On the gas world of Varn, a poet wrote a line he could not explain. "We fell and we rose and we remembered. That's why we never truly die." On Earth, the barefoot boy stood with Dr. Griggs at the edge of the hollow. The stars were no longer hostile. They were listening. Griggs turned to him. "Is it over?" The boy shook his head. "There's no end to a story that remembers itself, but they know now." "Know what?" The boy smiled. "Why we were locked away. Why Earth was left alone. Why no one came." He stepped forward into the wind. "We weren't the danger, we were the test." And in the farthest corners of the galaxy, carved into the ruins of old empires, scrawled in languages that never had an alphabet, whispered across the neural net of 1,000 sentient machines, the final warning echoed. Earth is not a planet. It is not a home. It is not safe. Earth is a memory that refuses to be forgotten. It is a question you cannot answer. It is the nightmare that teaches you to dream. And finally, written in red across the mind of every being who dared remember. Here be humans. Do not enter unless you are ready to understand.